What's up? It's Technicians Tuesday, and this week we are going to be talking about protecting your boat by knowing how to control and dock it. This week's contest prize is going to be a Shelter Bay Marine long sleeve fishing shirt, so listen for the Technicians tag. We are going to be talking about finger slips, floating docks, parallel docks, wind docking, single engine boats, twins, trips, quads, and different types of controls. So let's get into it. If you've spent any time searching around YouTube for boating videos, chances are very likely that you've come across some boat docking fail videos. Now, nobody wants to be that guy, but for most people, it's embarrassing to admit when we don't know something, and even more so when someone tries to teach us. Now, no one just inherits boat handling skills, they must be learned. I would say that there are three main things to know about handling a boat. That's wind, current, and neutral. We'll cover a couple of key notes really quick before getting into some hands-on examples. We need to know what direction the wind is blowing in order to judge where the boat is going to go. A floating boat is just an object for the wind to push along in whatever direction it is going. The same goes for the current. The current is going to pull the boat wherever it is going, and the best gear position to know about on the boat is neutral. Some other notable things are the type of boat and how many engines the boat has. Cabin cruisers can be more difficult because they have a lot more area for the wind to push, and single engine boats are more difficult than multiple engine boats. The more engines you have, the easier it is to handle because you can split the sticks and spin the boat. There is also the joystick world, but we'll only briefly touch that since it's not that common for most people. Another thing to note is how you are going to pull into the slip, whether it be forwards or backwards. From what I can tell, it's mainly personal preference to this, depending on where you are located and where you are docking. At most places on the ocean, you are going to see boats backed into the slips being more common. This is so that the bow is pointed into the oncoming wake and waves, as well as to make loading and unloading the boat a lot easier. One last thing to remember, we want to start any turn going with the wind whenever possible. This will make the turn a lot easier to control. So looking from above, when we go to pull into a slip, it's easier to pull past the slip going with the wind. Then once the helm of the boat is just past the slip, we can turn our wheel all the way over and begin backing into the slip. This will pull our bow back into the wind and give it the momentum for us to get the boat into the spot straight where we can grab the dock or piling. If we try and go the other way and go into the wind, then when we start backing into the slip, the momentum of the bow is going to be turning with the wind and we'll lose control of it. Depending on the situation, we'll then have to push off of whatever we are being blown into. If there are rocks or something else there, then this could potentially put us into a really bad situation. Looking at this same maneuver from the boat, pay attention to how neutral is used. Whenever we are doing anything in the boat, it's best to get into the habit of returning to neutral and then stopping to see what kind of momentum and what direction we have the boat floating in. Then we can use the engine as a guide to steer the boat in the direction we want. Once we begin the turn, we'll use short bumps of forward gear to slowly turn the boat, meaning we just put the handle in forward for a brief second and then return back to neutral to check on the boat's momentum. Then we'll use the reverse detent or the reverse gear position and just steer the engine to pull us backwards, returning to neutral ever so often to keep us from gaining too much speed. Notice that there is more time spent in neutral and floating than there is in gear. As we approach the boat behind us, we'll turn the engine over and then tap it into forward gear to stop us and push the back of the boat over to the dock so that we can grab it. This goes for getting into the finger slip as well, which can be a little more intimidating, but we like to advise everyone that is not used to handling a boat that it is a good idea to take one full hour or so out of one of their days and just spend the entire time pulling in and out of a slip. This practice time is just like teaching someone to drive a car. We don't teach people to drive in a crowded parking lot, Instead, we go to an empty parking lot and drive around. The same applies here. That solid hour or more pulling in and out of a slip will give you the skill and confidence in a quick period of time, and you will enjoy boating that much more when you can pull up to a busy spot and slip into any spot smoothly. When pulling into a finger slip when it is windy, this can get trickier because we will need to use more throttle and it will have to be done in a quicker period of time. Remember, we are going to lose the bow to the wind, so we need to beat that point before the bow is past the slip and get into the slip to be able to bump off the piling a little bit at that point. We'll start the turn a little sooner so that we can pull the bow over a little bit, and then we'll just pull into the slip quicker, and that's basically it. Doing this with a multiple engine boat is way easier though. The trick to doing it is learning how to split the control handles and spin the boat. We have a lot more control of the boat doing it this way. When we put one handle in forward and put the other in reverse, it will pull one side of the boat and push the other side, spinning the boat in place. Now carefully applying throttle at certain points will keep the boat from going too far in one direction. Generally, the boat will tend to push more forward than it will pull backwards. That is because the boat hull is designed to move forward through the water opposed to being dragged backwards. So most of the time during the turn, we'll be applying more reverse than we will forward. Using this technique, we can control the boat back into the slip a lot easier. This is easier the more engines we have. Whether it be twins or trips or even quads, this same technique can be used for any of them and will allow you the control of the boat to back it into a slip like a pro. Then when it comes to a boat that has a joystick, the trick to using it is to move it in very small increments. When you first use this, it's common to just push it all the way over and then you lose control of the boat. You want to use light movements and just barely move the joystick around to move the boat where you want it to go. It's a good place to start when docking to default to going slow. Now that we have talked about the techniques, let's talk a little bit about the controls. Most people have used a boat with a single or twin control box. Most triple and quad engine boats manufactured in the last decade will also only have two handles. It's the separate controls that usually mess with people. These aren't that complicated, it's just unusual when you use them for the first time. The technique is the same though, we want to use the neutral position regularly. And we really won't use the throttles that much at all, unless it is really windy and we need that extra speed. We'll just slowly work our way into wherever we're pulling into, using the neutral position to allow us to float into the slip. If you think about it more as floating rather than driving, it will make it a lot easier. I like to stand next to the controls and only watch the back of the boat, bumping the shifter into gear and back into neutral, then watching the boat as it floats into the slip, using short bumps to build a slight amount of momentum to get the boat back into the slip.
Nope.
Now when it is really windy, we want to look for wind blockers such as other boats. If we are trying to pull up to a straight dock and parallel park, if going into the wind, we will want to pull up straight at the dock. Then we'll pull the engine hard over to whichever side you want on the outside of the dock and let the boat float in during a turn towards the dock. When the boat approaches the dock about 5 feet off of it, we'll turn the engine hard over to the other side and then put it into reverse to pull the boat into the dock. We'll use this same technique when we are pulling into a slip when it is windy and we have another boat to block the wind and there isn't a boat in the way, stopping us from doing this maneuver. If we don't have the wind blocker, then if it's possible, you'll want to pull past the slip and turn the boat around so that we can pull up to the slip with the wind, and then before the slip we want to pull into, we'll begin the turn. Almost as if we are going to pull into the slip right before our slip. This way we will be pulling the bow into the wind and allowing us to get the boat sideways and have the wind blow us into the slip as we are backing into it. Pulling up to a dock sideways is a little different though. To do this, we want to come at the dock almost parallel with it, but at a slight angle under a 45-degree angle. We'll still be utilizing the neutral position while doing this. We can drive the boat forward until we get the bow of the boat to almost touch the dock. Then we can turn the engine all the way over to point towards the dock and place it into reverse to pull the back of the boat up to the dock. If there is a boat there and we need to get in between two boats, then we'll pull up next to the boat parallel with it and then do the same exact motion by pulling past the boat and putting the bow on an angle against the dock, turning the wheel over and pulling the back of the boat against the dock. If you go and practice these techniques for an hour somewhere at an empty dock, you will be able to handle your boat better than half of all the boat owners that are out on the water, which is completely worth smashing that like button for. As for a quick tip on tying up the boat, I like to tie cleats like this, coming from the dock around the back of the cleat and up to the front of it. Then once around the front, we'll cross over the cleat to the back of it, go under and around the back, then we'll go over the top to the other side of the cleat and just twist the line like this before pulling it onto the cleat and tightening it down. This makes for a clean, tight tie-up that's easy to undo. If you want to win the fishing shirt this week, just get subscribed to the channel, follow us on Instagram, and drop a comment below with a hashtag TYColonite since we didn't get to thank them in last week's contest. And to learn how to tie up your dock lines the correct way, I would suggest watching How to Tie a Boat Up at the Dock by Brooke Christ Outdoors. Her dad does a great job explaining how to tie up a boat the right way. I'll put a link in the description for that below. You can visit us at bornagainboating.com. Thank you for hanging out, and we'll see you next week.